Hello, everyone. I'm Monica the Creative Beast, and I want to say thank you for tuning into my channel today. I will be sharing one of my very first art journals that I created when I began attending the Artful Journey retreat that took place in Santa Cruz. It was an art retreat that took place for a few years, and it has sadly come to an end, and I really miss it. But I made some really wonderful connections. I learned about art journals and art books and making them from some really amazing artists. And this is one of my very first art journals. So let me just go ahead and show you this big art journal here. And it's also sort of an altered book because the covers are from an existing book, and I gutted the insides to use just the covers. This was a sad old sewing book that had seen better days, and I'll be sharing the back cover and how it looked when I first purchased it. And you'll see how it was just looking really kind of sad. So the pages were getting a little sad. And I think I now have a better copy of this book. And I used a lot of the pages from the inside of the book to make artful envelopes for mail art, and not much was wasted, really. So let me go ahead and share some more of this book. This was my very first year at the Artful Journey Art Retreat. And the instructor was, well, two instructors, actually. They were Kelly Rae Roberts and Mady Rose. You may know them in artwork, and they have some accounts online, and I will share some of that with you in the bottom of this video, underneath this video. So let's focus on the book. I decided I would call it Guide for Artful Creativity, so I altered some of the cover, and this is a fun little flower element that I added that can move around. This is a ticket that I got in one of my first little crafty scrap exchanges at this very first art retreat. And I decided I would use some elements of this book. So technically it's a Random House book, but there's threads of music featuring Hope, a completely revised guide to painting, community, friendship, expression, collage. So let's begin. And you can see that the little hinge for the outer flower has been hidden by this one that's glued in place. There's a bit of fun tape there, so I'll be moving back and forth so you can see all the pages of this book. Now, this is my template for the hole punching. I was going to originally make it a 3-hole punch, but for some reason I decided I would just go with 2. So now it's just a 2-hole punch. And in between a lot of the pages, I have either wax paper or cereal bags cut into pages, because a lot of the gel medium that I use, sometimes it gets sticky between pages and things stick, and I don't really like that. So this is a page using a vintage doily and some paint for texture. This is a stencil that I have, and there was some sprayed paint, and just started layering. This is sort of a background. I could either write on it or I could add more to it. In this art book, you'll find that I actually have a lot of pages that would be great backgrounds for journaling or writing, or for adding more, like this one. So there's just some sprayed paint, and I used some medium to swirl it around to make a nice pretty glaze. And I added some rubber stamping. This is actually, I found in the street. I think it is a bicycle brake that fell off, and this is the design that it makes when stamped. So it's part of my rubber stamp arsenal. And this is another page. So the colors are a little intense from the light in my studio, but it's more orange, really, than red, but it's pretty close. And I used tape to tape off these areas that I could write in, and then pulled it up, and then I added a little bit of watered down paint so it wasn't so stark white. Some stencils, all kinds of interesting textures being added here, some little paint dots with paint left over. Now to go for this page, it's just some paint applied to the page, and I really love paint chips, so you'll see paint chips in a lot of my work. And I haven't really done anything with the back of this paint chip, so I might put some paper or paint to it and then maybe add some tape to make it a hinge, because you'll see a lot of that in this journal. I use a lot of paint chips that are backed, that could be journaled on, and pop out elements. So here's some scrapbook paper that I purchased for the retreat, some vintage postage stamps that are part of my collection of vintage postage stamps, tickets, I like using tickets in my art. So this is an unfolding of some of the art techniques I learned in the retreat and ways I like to play with paper and collage and mixed media. Another little paint chip that's been clipped on. There's nothing on the back, so I just like having that little clippy kind of goes with the rest of the page. And I did do this at the retreat, and I made this at the retreat because this, actually I made this after the retreat and added it because there's an image that I took at the retreat. There was a hardware store that had little baby chicks, and I would take pictures and I would make video. I finally got a picture of myself with these baby chicks on the last retreat that was held. I backed this paint chip here with some paper so I could journal on it. I always meant to tell a little story about the chickies, so I'll do that eventually. This is a piece of page from a calendar. I believe the artist is Sherry Smith. I'll have to look it up. I don't always remember the name, but I really liked her artwork. She did beautiful florals. I saved this piece and then backed it with some sheet music. And then I did an image transfer. This is Isabella Rossellini in a photo shoot in the magazine. I really loved this image. So I have the original page. I've made black and white copies. So this image of Isabella kind of pops up in some of my work too. You see it. And because of the gel medium, I have a protector sheet. And this is just some paint swirled around, or it might actually be some tea. I'm not sure yet. So I could write all over this page if I wanted, or I can add to it. So there are some pages that I might add to in the future, and if I do, I will share that later. This is some of my favorite ephemera. I actually love working with math pages, chemistry, physics, tables. There's something about the symbols of algebra and chemistry and physics that's really fascinating. And if you look carefully, you'll see this was supposed to be a page of integrals, but then I used my vintage typewriter to write integrity matters. All good things to know are difficult to learn, but that's because we are always learning, so everything has a learning curve, so it feels difficult. I think that's my theory. So on the next page, there's lots of yummy orange paint, lots of paint chips that are all backed, and each one opens a little differently. So this one opens up, this one opens out, and this one also opens out. So I could write on this, I can write all over this. I like to have lots of room for writing, even though I'm not really a big diary journal kind of person. I really like to play with art and play with techniques. That's what most of my art journals are about, really. So this is another paint chip, and I hinged a lot of them in this book on the inside than on the outside. And this is actually bits of tissue paper. This is a tissue paper, that's a tissue paper. And I like to color coordinate things. And this is another page with orange on it, and another paint chip covered. I could write on that. It's just kind of a mix of paint, texture, scrapbook paper. Some paint, some rubber stamps, covered paint chip. Oops. I was lucky to come across some beautiful vintage store catalogs from a store called Altman's back in the day that my grandmother had. So I've often used the illustration imagery from those catalogs for some of my work. These ladies are part of that. I like to call this one my heritage page. My heritage is Mexican American and some Central American on my father's side. I collect vintage currency and vintage postcards. I found her and I made a photocopy of her. I really like her. And I found this postcard and I made a photocopy of that. Photocopy of Mexican currency. These receipts are from my grandmother's travels. She would keep her receipts from when she would make trips to Mexico to visit family and go shopping. And some of these pages are cut off because I was working with large sheets of paper during this workshop. And the smaller ones make up a companion book. I like to call it a companion book, and there'll be a flip through that journal soon. This is just some paint smeared on the paper. I have yet to do anything to it. I could write on it or add more to it. So this is, I just kind of like it the way it is, actually, so I might keep it that way forever. Who knows? This was a page that was made later. Some of the smaller, shorter pages were pages that I made later after the retreat. So there's some paint and ink. I used the ink dropper to make these doodles. I could write on these pages or add more. We'll see. This is scrapbook paper. I put these two separate sheets together to make a whole, and this is a little sticker, journaling kind of sticker, and it all coordinates. Lots of red, bits of green. I color coordinate a lot. Another page that has paint on it. I think I probably used a credit card to make these lined smears. I like this. I like these colors. I like the texture. Again, I'll probably just leave it that way, but maybe one day I'll add something. Just like this one. I might add something. I might write on it. Who knows? But it's a page. And I did make this page while I was at the retreat. My love of maps shows all over here. The compass. I've got a rubber stamp for a compass. Explore. What I wrote in here is she dreamed of far away travel. I have a little flower in her hair. Yeah, I guess you could say she's supposed to be me. Nice collar from the legend of the map. And a little vintage button to keep that collar closed. This is one of my favorites. There's some ink splatter. This was done later at home. A scrap of sheet music, some little scraps of old book pages. I've actually photocopied this, and I use it sometimes to make some simple altered composition books, and one of them might even be in my shop still. I'll leave a link for that. This was a page I made later, so I have lots of different stencils on this page. And then this is some holiday gift wrap that's got some nice gold gilt on it, and this is a scrap from what kind of a book? It's some sort of, it's not exactly a dictionary, it's a encyclopedia of some kind. Because I keep encyclopedias, I buy dictionaries, and I use those in my artwork and mixed media a lot. I like the encyclopedias for the columns. They're often in 3 columns. There's dictionaries. So here's another scrap of the encyclopedia paper. This was a little something I found on the ground during a walk. I think it was somebody's dry cleaning ticket. Some paint with some glaze to make it all nice and smooth, and then some gold with some stenciling of dots happening here. Oops. Sorry about that. Let's see if we can try and get back to, there we go. Sorry about that, folks. Thanks for your understanding. I'm going to keep on going. And the next page, napkins. I love working with napkins. I love napkins, so much fun. So this is, napkin, and this here's the between layer of a different napkin. This is some scrapbook paper. This is some of the holiday paper that had some gilt on it. I also like to collect stenography books. I love to see the shorthand of stenography, and then you see what the words are. Ledgers. I use that a lot in a lot of my artwork and mixed media. More stencils. These are just a vintage plastic doily. You've probably seen some of those. This is a nice stencil. It's kind of copper on top of aqua, just a color combo I like to play with from time to time. This was made during the art retreat. At least it was started, and then I finished it at home, because I don't usually work with purple, but I had a lot of purple paint from something, so I smeared it around, made a bunch of little dots, and I had some of this scrapbook paper, added it down here, and from my vintage postage collection, we have the Queen. The Queen. So this is designed in a way that, again, I could write on it, or I could add more. Who knows? And this, I really loved this one when I made this at the retreat. So this is probably where the purple paint came, and I added green, so it was a mix of the two. I had these tickets, used a rubber stamp, had some paint that came out in dots, so I just made dots along here. I had a sheet from the chemistry book, and this rubber stamp of a dragonfly. And these little scraps right here kind of bookend the corners. So the theme is a sort of green, purple, aqua theme on this page. I really love it. I made this page, I think I started it at the retreat. More tickets and paper that comes together. Rubber stamps, some faint little gold stars. I feel like this is a very beachy scene, so I could journal about being at the beach. And people who've been following me for a while know I love being in Ventura, which is a beach town, so maybe I'll journal about a day in Ventura one of these days. Who knows? And this is another favorite page. People see this and they really love it. More tickets, buttons, because I'm a seamstress, some scrapbook paper, some dotty stenciling, streaks of light watercolor paint, and the combination of green and orange, which is a favorite combination. This is a page I made when I was at the retreat, so I had some vintage ads from a vintage sheet of ephemera, some vintage French books, pattern paper, scrapbook paper, more tickets. This one was given to me when I was at the retreat. So I love, vintage women, vintage ads when I can find them. Sometimes I use pattern paper in my work. I don't do it too often. I'd like to do more of it, so I'm going to work on that. I know people love working with it. And it's fun because it's a sheer paper, so you can still see what's happening underneath it if you work with it in a really good way. And this was a fun page I made. This was something we were given, so I made that the focal point. People had some scraps of fabric that they were sharing. I had the button and fabric. In our play, we reveal what kind of people we are. I think I added these later, so I'm sure you recognize them as little, red bag lips. And it goes from light to medium to dark. Woo! This was given to me by one of my fellow retreat attendees. She was a lucky girl from Australia. This is my favorite number, 18. And this was also done at the retreat. Lots and lots of paint going on. This is a little barcode sticker. I thought about pulling it up, but now I'm not sure I really like the white, so I might just go ahead and glue that all back down because it's kind of like a fun little odd bit. And I got the signature of Kelly Rae Roberts, Matey Rose, and their friend Andrea Scher. So they are people who are on the internet. This is the back of another sheet. So this is a bit that was clipped from a sheet that was at the beginning of the page. You can see more of this paint here. Really like it. And there was a little bit of fine mesh that I used to make some texture down here. And a little clip, color coordinates. I love color coordination. And this was some paint that was lifted up with some vintage lace. This is some gold leafing with stencils. This is some gold leafing on top of some gold paint. This is a bit of a mishmash. I will probably cover over it at some point. I wasn't really thrilled with the way it turned out, but it's in the book for now, so it stays. And I made this after I got home, so numbers from an algebra book, from a learning to type book. I have some of those too, because some of the exercises, learning to type books are really fun. Tiny bit of sheet music and another scrap. I was playing with some techniques I'd seen other people do. It wasn't quite working out, so I wound up washing over the whole thing with a little gesso, and then I used some brown ink and sprayed it out. This is a photocopy of a vintage photo that I have in my collection, because I go to paper ephemera shows where I get vintage photos, vintage book pages, vintage postage stamps. So she's in my collection. I keep the original and I make photocopies. Yeah, maybe one day I'll make a digital version of her so people can play with her too. And some simple light rubber stamps. Bold. She may be little, but she's bold. And here's the back side, made at home. A page from a vintage novel. Sheet music plays in my artwork a lot. I really love music and sheet music. Here's like a little something from a dictionary about textiles. And one of my favorite quotes, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Yeah, I believe that. And because I've just sewed everything to make it lighter, this could actually be written on, or it can stay as background and more added to it. This was some learning to play with spray paints at the retreat. And again, the paint with the dot applicator. We make these little target dots. Another paint chip. And a color-coordinated clip to keep it in place. I don't have anything on the back of this one either, so I might add to it one day and reattach it differently. Some spray paint and paper doilies and a stencil. And these are just little sticky notes that I received at the retreat. I thought they were really pretty, so I used them. They stay nice and flat when the book is closed. So some stencils, some doilies. I think I still have this doily to try and use it again, and I have other doilies in my collection now. And this was made later, so this was a full sheet that was cut, and the rest of it is in the companion book. I love vintage looking type papers that have an antique aged look to them. So this is like a page of collections. This is the #1 collection vintage paper. And then #2 is hearts. Hearts are fun. They're fun to look at, fun to play with. This is #3, maps. Maps of all kinds. So I have all kinds of maps that I like to use. #4 is butterflies. I love butterflies, and these are taken from napkins. These are napkins, and the other half is on the rest of the sheet, and you'll see that in the companion book sometime soon with other collections of things. And on the back side is, hello me, rubber stamps. I'm an artist. My name begins with M. I love pink. I have a rubber stamp of a magic wand. I have a rubber stamp of a crown. I've got these pink flowers up here. I could add writing if I wanted to. This is some rub-on alphabets. But yeah, Making art is magic, right? Making art is magic. And I don't know if you can hear, there's a dog barking in the neighborhood, so if you can hear it, my apologies. He's a yapper. So this is the inside back of the cover of the book, adding a little bit of scrap paper. Here's another paint chip with a little bit of washi tape and this little transparency, and this really fun little floral pink clip. So this is the inside back, and here's the back of the book, and you'll see the shape this book was in. This was the way it looked. It was in sad shape, lots of damage, and all I did was use a little tiny bit of pink watercolor paint and gave it the lightest wash, so now you can see some pink here and there. It's a little more pink all over, but all of this is really how the back of the book was. It was in really bad shape. This is some sticker of measuring tape. That is part of my sticker stash. And little bits of it are in the corner here and here. And there's the pink floral clippy again. And binder rings. So yeah, so this is kind of coming apart. I might have to fix that a little bit. And I used to have some streamers coming from the top, but I want to add some more to this book, and then I'll figure out what I'll do with the binder rings to make it a little more decorative. So here it is, the guide to artful creativity. And that is my very first art journal book that I ever made. A kind of mix of art journal and altered book. My goodness, my camera's going all over the place. So yeah, my very first art journal art book. I learned a lot. I learned a lot of techniques. I learned about art journals and what they are. I learned about art books and altering books. And I've been on a wild journey of that ever since. So thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you subscribe to my channel and you can turn on the notifications so whenever I make a new video of an art book or the Are You Book Enough art retreat, art book challenge. I make a lot of art books, one a month for that challenge, and I have a lot of altered books that I'm working on and other books that I make that go for sale in my Etsy shop. And I'll be making some more videos about those books soon. So I hope you'll subscribe to my channel, turn on notifications so you'll know when I make another video, whether it's having a creative chat or sharing some of my art books here with you. So thank you so much for joining me. Sorry about the camera mix-up, and thanks for your patience. I hope you had a lot of fun flipping through this journal, and when I make more pages, I'll share them again soon with you. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time.